All right, today we're tackling a question that every big company has to answer. How do you take the cost of your internal support teams like IT or maintenance and fairly spread it out among the departments that actually make the stuff you sell? It sounds a little dry, but trust me, the answers are pretty clever. Let's get into it.
First, let's bring this down to earth. Imagine you're splitting bills with roommates. You've got internet, electricity. Do you just split it evenly? Or what about the roommate who works from home, streaming video all day? Should they pay a bigger chunk of that electricity bill? Suddenly, it's not so simple, is it?
Well, businesses face a massive version of this exact same problem. They have what are called service departments, think IT, HR, custodial services, that support the production departments, the ones actually making the products. Figuring out how to allocate those support costs is absolutely critical, and as we're about to see, there are a few different ways to go about it. Okay, let's start with method number 1, the direct approach. And as the name implies, it is the most straightforward, no-frills way of doing things. For a lot of companies, it's the good enough solution.
So with the direct method, you take all the costs from a service department, like IT, and you just push them directly to the production departments. Now the key here, the big catch, is what it ignores. It completely ignores any work the service departments do for each other. So if the IT team helps the custodial crew with their scheduling software, this method just pretends that never happened.
And you can see that right here. That $120,000 from IT and the $40,000 from custodial services, they go straight to milling and finishing, the production departments. You'll notice there are no arrows, no connection at all between IT and custodial. It's clean, it's simple, but it's definitely not the full story.
So if we want to get a little more accurate, where do we go from here? Well, let's level up to our second method, the step-down method. This one starts to add a little more nuance and gets us way closer to the real cost of things.
Now, unlike the direct method, the step-down method actually acknowledges that, hey, service departments help each other out. The catch is, it does this in a very specific one-way sequence. You basically rank the departments and then allocate costs down the line, in order.
So here's how it works. First, you decide on a ranking for your service departments. You take the first one and you allocate its costs to every other department, both service and production. Then you step down to the next one and do it again. But here's the crucial rule. Once a department's costs are allocated out, its book is closed. It can't receive any costs from the departments that come after it. It's a one-way street.
And here's what that looks like in practice. See how we start by allocating the custodial costs? A piece of that, $8,000, goes over to information technology. So now, the total IT cost that needs to be allocated has jumped up to $128,000. This makes the whole thing more accurate, because it now reflects the cost of the support custodial gave to IT.
All right, now for the grand finale. The most precise, the most comprehensive, and, you guessed it, the most complex method of them all, the reciprocal method. This one is really considered the gold standard if what you're after is pure accuracy.
The whole idea behind the reciprocal method is based on reality, right? Support isn't a one-way street. IT helps the maintenance team, and at the same time, the maintenance team is making sure the AC is working in the IT server room. This method fully accounts for that two-way mutual support. It recognizes that everyone is helping everyone else all the same time.
Now, to pull this off, you need a bit more firepower. This method actually uses a set of simultaneous algebraic equations to solve for the true cost of each department. Don't worry, we're not going to do any math here, but just knowing that it's happening under the hood shows you just how precise this approach is aiming to be.
So on the left, you can see the kind of equations we're talking about. And on the right, you see the result. Look at that. IT allocates costs to custodial, and custodial allocates costs right back to IT. Every single interaction is accounted for, which gives you the most accurate possible final costs for milling and finishing. It's complicated for sure, but it gets you the closest to what's really happening. Okay, so we've got our three main methods, but there's one more layer of sophistication we can add on top of any of them. Think of this less as a whole new method and more like a power-up that just makes any of the other approaches even better.
This is the idea of using a dual rate. Until now, we've basically been using a single rate, lumping all of a department's costs, both fixed and variable, into one big bucket. Well, the dual rate method is smarter. It separates them. And that's really important because fixed costs, like rent on the server room, behave differently than variable costs, like a programmer's hourly wage.
Take a look at this IT department, for example. The fixed costs for their hardware, that gets allocated based on CPU cycles, a measure of how much the hardware is being used.
But the variable costs, for the programmer hours spent on different projects, that gets allocated based on actual technician hours. It's just so much more logical, and it gives managers a way clearer picture of what's really driving their costs.
So we have the direct, the step-down, and the reciprocal methods, plus that dual rate power-up. But at the end of the day, why does any of this really matter? Let's zoom out from the theory for a second and look at the real-world impact.
What it all boils down to is this fundamental trade-off. The direct method is super simple, but it's not very accurate. The reciprocal method is incredibly accurate, but it's a huge pain to implement. And the step-down method, it sits somewhere in the middle. Choosing between these isn't just some technical thing for the accountants. It's a major strategic business decision.
And that decision creates massive ripple effects. How you allocate these costs can literally change the selling price of your products. It changes how you value your inventory on your financial statements. It shapes decisions about which departments are running efficiently and which ones aren't. And hey, if your bonus is tied to your department's profitability, you can bet you care a lot about how these costs are assigned.
And that really gets to the heart of it. This is not just about accountants crunching numbers in a back room. The method a company chooses to use actually shapes its entire understanding of its own business. It affects strategy, it affects profitability, and it even affects how it judges the performance of its own people.
So this all leaves us with one final big question to think about. We know the reciprocal method is the most accurate. It's the perfect answer theoretically. But it's also the most difficult and expensive to do. So the real strategic question for any business is this. In a world with limited time and resources, when is a simple, good enough answer actually better than a complex, perfect one?